All right, welcome back to the show. My name is Chad, and today we are going to be talking with Olivia Cartero-Briggs, who is working with Mad Cave as on it's called Winx Fate, the Winx Saga Volume 1, Dark Destiny, and it is a companion to the show that is currently running on Netflix. I believe there's two seasons of it. I've only kind of started watching it, so I'm going to bring in Olivia, and we'll find out more about her and the series. Good evening, Olivia. How's it going?
I am well, Chad. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. So, before we get talking about, the book, tell us a little bit about yourself. Is this your first time writing comics, or and also, did you grow up with comics, reading them, or what's your history with comics as a reader and a creator?
Well, I am a native New Yorker, so I grew up in New York City, mostly in Midtown Manhattan. And when I was growing up, I remember like running to what we had like a little newsstand. It was it's very New York, where they would have Archie comics and Archie digests. And at the time, you and I were chatting about this a little bit beforehand. You were saying you're an '80s kid. I'm very much a '90s kid. And what was on the stands at the time, for the most part, in terms of comic books, it was a lot of superhero stuff, which I didn't really feel like was for me. And when there was a woman on the cover, of course, for the most part at the time, very scantily clad, and it did not look like anything that was for me. But I loved Archie comics and Betty and Veronica and Spectaculars and all of that. But I think because of that early impression of very few comics being for me, for young women, for women in general, I never really thought about writing for comics. It was something that I had kind of completely overlooked. And of course, in the interim between being a child in New York and becoming an adult, comics, the entire industry experienced a complete overhaul, um, which has been really tremendous and very inspiring. So I found my way into comics. I had gotten out of grad school where I went for dramatic writing, NYU Tisch. They had a campus in Singapore at the time. And I had befriended Adam Glass, who has done a ton of comics. He also works in film and television, and had a couple jobs in TV. And the show that I was working on at the time that I was writing for, called The Arrangement, was canceled. And I called Adam all freaked out, and I said, "Yeah, I need something. What have you got?" And he said, "Well, I don't have anything in TV right now, but I've been dying to write this comic book, Mary Shelley Monster Hunter, but it needs a female voice. Will you do this with me?" And I mean, the concept in and of itself was so hot and crunchy that I immediately agreed. Also, the opportunity to work with Adam, for anyone who knows him, he's an incredible creative. And I just fell completely in love with the medium, the freedom of expression, the support from the editorial staff, just the amount of imagination that can go into these books. And coming from the TV world, where you have budgetary concerns, and there's certain things that actors will and won't do. There are certain limitations to your creativity. Not that they're not healthy limitations, but there's much less in the world of comic books, and I was hooked. It
Mhm.
also probably helped that I was being mentored by someone who had had a ton of experience. Um, and yeah, so I have been telling stories in the medium ever since. My next book was also with Aftershock, my first solo series, that was called Silver City. Adam and I did go on to write Bram Stoker Monster Hunter, which was announced, but unfortunately, Aftershock has been dealing with some bankruptcy issues. So the book is sitting there, but it can't come out for really fun, awful legal reasons. I also did a horror book with them again, waiting for them to sort through their issues. But in the meantime, earlier this year, I had my first book with Oni Press, which was another amazing experience. I love them over there. That was Jill and the Killers, which is a comedy horror murder mystery series. And this is my first book with Maverick, which, yes, is under the Mad Cave Studios umbrella. So Mike Martz, who was the editor-in-chief of Aftershock, ended up moving over to Mad Cave Studios. I didn't know anything about them before, and doing a little bit of investigation and chatting with the folks over there, I had literally fallen in love with everyone at that company. But this was the first project that they brought me in on. So I said, listen, guys, I would love to work for you. I have so many ideas I want to pitch you. And they said, okay, great. We want to hear all your pitches, but we have property and we need to write the book. I think at the time they were like, you will like have about 7 months to finish this because it needs to come out by, it was supposed to, originally the book was going to come out last Christmas. So I, like you, was unfamiliar with Winx Club and Fate the Winx Saga. So I was like, okay, let me check this out. And I thought the show did so much with what they had. And I loved the cast and I loved the brooding tone and how much they favored, they allowed the characters' drama, the real teenage angsty drama, to drive the plot. And I thought it was so engaging and addictive that I said, absolutely, yes, I want to do this. And now, a year and change later, the book is finally on shelves. This is actually, I'm not sure you guys are recording this, but the day that we are recording this, this is the official pub day. It's on shelves
That's
today.
right. Well, hopefully this will be out tomorrow or Friday, so it's out there now.
It's out
Go
there
get
now,
it.
so we can talk about it. Oh my gosh, I haven't been able to talk about it, so it's fun. It's fun to do this now. The cat's out of the bag.
So tell us, for people like myself who don't know about the show, what is the show about broadly?
So, yeah, so Fate the Winx Saga, this is a kind of a crude way to put it, but it's kind of like a Riverdale of Winx Club, right? So they're teenagers, it's dark, it's brooding. It takes place with there's two distinct groups. There's specialists and fairies, and they all go to this school in the other world called Alfea. Which is a magical school, but it seems like with two very diverse curriculums. So you have the specialists who are basically, it's kind of like the other world's version of the military, right? So these kids are being trained in different, fighting techniques and otherworldly weaponry. We get to introduce a cool weapon in the books. And then the other group are the fairies. And then within the fairies, there is the Winx Suite. Which are, it's a group of girls that live in one suite in the Winx house and are especially powerful and bonded. And so, within this world, we follow a character named Bloom Peters, who has lived in our world, this world, her entire life, having these strange powers that she could not explain. She could light fires, and for those of you who see the show, you've known this, but she was not very much in control of her powers, and she ended up nearly killing her family when she got angry and set fire to her house. She had a kind of a tumultuous relationship with her mother. So she's showing up at Alfea. Finally, she knows what she is, but the story kind of follows her discovering just how important she is in the other world and how special she is. And deals with a lot of her inner turmoil, the scars that she's developed from, being kind of an outsider and having done what she considers to be horrible things in her life, and how she is growing into her own, now finally surrounded with people who understand her more or less. So that's the basic premise. And then, of course, once we're in the other world and we're at Alfea, there are various nefarious factions that want the power that the fairies have, come after them, attack them. And it really is another one of my favorite things about the story is it's about a group of young women who find the strength within themselves to defend their entire school and way of life. And yes, there are administrators and teachers at the school, but it really is this group of girls, this core group of young women, who are the biggest defenders and are making things happen and keeping their world safe.
Now, where does this book take place? Because I believe there's 2 seasons of the show out. Am I correct?
Yeah, so
Is it
there were 2 seasons of the show, and I think Maverick acquired the rights to the graphic novels before Netflix canceled the series. So it was only once the Netflix series was canceled that they then came to me and said, "Hey, this could be a continuation of the
Mhm.
Netflix
Okay?
series." But it was kind of a twofold assignment because yes, we wanted it to continue the story, but we also wanted folks who were new to Fate the Winx Saga to be able to pick up the book and understand where they were. So a new arc had to be constructed, but picking up with the characters more or less where we left them. So in order to do that, I put a 6-month gap between the end of season 2 and the beginning of this book so we could kind of reset the characters, find them where they are. Some of the revelations that were being built to in season 2, for the sake of introducing a new arc, had to kind of already have occurred once we picked up. So there's a little bit of catching up to do for readers who are fans of the show. Um, but yeah, it is both a continuation and its own thing.
Okay. I mean, you've uh, talked about the one main character. Was there any other character? Because it looks that you said there was a group of them. Was there
Yeah.
another character that you kind of attached to while you were writing the book, or would you know consider exploring their story more?
Yeah, no, I really loved the characters as they were crafted in the series. Many of them. The standout to me was the character of Terra. I think in part because the actress that played her was just so vibrant. She had wonderful comedic timing, but she also really pulled off the dramatic scenes, and she was just so charming. And she came out as gay in the second season, and you could kind of tell where she was crushing. And so being able to pick up that storyline and bring that relationship to fruition was incredibly fun for me, and very, very fulfilling. And at the time I was having some issues with my current partner, so it was fun to be able to give them our issues and see how they deal with them, which is always fun for me and
Yeah.
cathartic as a creator. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed Terra. But probably in terms of dialogue, my favorite character to write was Aisha. She's very ballsy, she's very strong, she's fiercely driven, but she's also quite funny, and she's not afraid to say kind of what everyone's thinking or exactly what's on her mind. It doesn't matter how controversial that is. And having that character in the scene with you've seen the show. They're, even though this is Alfea in the other worlds, they're all vaguely British, right? So a lot of the characters,
I
they
mean,
have
who isn't?
aren't we all? But they have these very polite sensibilities. And so to have a character who's not afraid to, say, well, that person's kind of an a-hole, it's
Mhm,
fun. It's fun to
mhm.
have that energy in the room, as it were. And then the other character that I thought was just deliciously complicated in the series was Stella. For those of you who aren't familiar with the series, you have this character who, from the top, has done this horrible thing. She has the power of light and she's blinded someone. And you find out throughout the course of the series that she didn't intentionally blind the person, she accidentally blinded them. But because she's the daughter of the queen, to have it out there that she lost control of her powers is more controversial than the idea that she intentionally harmed someone. So she's taken on this fictitious role of a kind of a bad person in order to keep her reputation and that of her family. And what that has done to her is, as creators, we're always told to torture your characters. I mean, talk about tortured. And to me, she was always so clearly in love with Sky, who was so clearly in love with Bloom. And so to take this tortured character and put her in the situation that I put her in the book, where once again she's having to put on a false persona under pressure of other people. It was I tortured her some more, but it was very, very fun to write. And for me, as a creator, as a woman, and at my quote unquote advanced age, you do start to realize how much of your life, and this is not exclusive to women, human beings do this all the time, how much time you spend trying to please other people and trying to be what other people want you to be, and to embody that in a very literal way, which we do in Dark Destiny. It was very, very cathartic. And I think that's why, at least I gravitate towards telling stories with young people. And I think that's also why, we love consuming anything in this teenage arena, because it's so raw and it's so visceral and it's so cathartic.
So I know um, you mentioned that you had to, you have a gap, a 6 month gap between when the show ends and when the book starts. Were there any other difficulties taking the material from the show and translating it into the comic book, and while still making it, you know, relatable to both new readers and fans of the show?
Well, I think you can't make all the people happy all the time. And that's been a real lesson for me in terms of writing this book. This is my first foray into pre-existing IP. And to be completely honest with you, I did not know how passionate the fan base was, and necessarily how precious they might be about certain elements. But at the end of the day, all we can do as creators is be true to ourselves and our intentions and tell the best story possible. So, in terms of the actual storytelling, it felt like it flowed very easily to take what was set up by Brian Young and Fate the Winx Saga, and to continue that story, because the characters were so well drawn. But there were some elements that had to be adjusted for the book, and those are like, boring technical things, like characters that we had the rights to and then characters that we didn't have the rights to, that if they hadn't appeared in the show before, we couldn't necessarily bring them into the book. Some we could, some we couldn't. So dancing around that was an interesting challenge. And yeah, I think and I wouldn't say this is a difficulty, it's a challenge. I was also, writing in a dialect that is not necessarily native to me. I'm American, and again, they're all vaguely British. I find it fun, but again, half the time I'm writing, I'm also like on the internet, like looking up various terms and how would they say this, and but
Isn't every other word like wanker or something?
I would hope not. I don't know if that would make for the most compelling read. Also, they'd be insulting each other all the time. But yes, no, there were definitely, and then oh gosh, then I would see something, or I've been spending some time in the UK lately, and I hear a phrase that they use a lot, and I think, oh my god, I should have put that in. How did I miss that? But again, what we had here, what they wanted, what we all wanted, was to basically draft an entire new season with these books. But we only had about 200 pages for an entire arc. The first volume is 100 pages, and that was a time restraint. We only had so much time to have this illustrated, so we only had about 100 pages for the first half. So constructing an entire season arc in 200 pages, that was a really big challenge. And there were certain characters whose storylines we couldn't service. So are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Yes, there were certain characters that we just couldn't service and give big arcs to. Obviously, they're in the story, but we couldn't give them a whole arc. So my hope is that these first two volumes do really well, so we get to do a third volume and service some of the characters that we didn't get to before.
Well, you kind of alluded to it. Who's the artist that's the work that you worked with on the book?
Um, I'm gonna murder her last name. Way
That's why I was going to have you say
way
it.
worse than you murdered mine. Uh, let me see if I can. Oh my gosh, let me see if I can pronounce this. She has a hyphenated last name like I do. So okay, let's see. Christiane Guillenardo Goudreau. It's beautiful. I probably mispronounced it. Um, but yeah, so this was something that was really interesting. So, you know, this is a YA book. It's kind of a dark, brooding story, much like the show. And in fact, I listened to the soundtrack for the show as I was writing it to really, really get that dark tone. Of course, there are moments of levity. We're dealing with teenagers, but it is dark. And Christiane's illustrations are obviously, you know, a bit. They suggest a lighter tone, and they're a bit more. I'm. This is like, I don't know if this is a word that's used, and I'm certainly not trying to degrade her art style at all. But cartoonish, right?
Hmm.
Less rooted in realism.
Right.
And I think that it took me by surprise, and I think that it took a lot of the, you know, the waiting fans by surprise as well. Um, but there was a reason for it, and this is was interesting to me. While we had the rights to the characters from the Netflix show, we did not have the rights to the actors' likenesses.
Mm.
So we had to go with a different art style. It couldn't be too realistic. Then when I opened this book and I saw these pages and what she had done, I was really blown away. There was so much emotion packed into these pages and these illustrations. You can really, really see why she is who she is, and she's done as many projects as she has. But I think because this was pre-existing IP, and also because we were on an incredibly tight schedule, I didn't even meet her until the first book was done, and we were at Seattle for Emerald City Comic Con. It was the first time that we had ever had a conversation, and we were both abjectly terrified of when this book came out because we had both underestimated the veracity of the fan base. But I think what she did uh, is really tremendous, and it has certainly changed my view of what you can do with these, you know, more suggestive art styles. I really think it's tremendous, and she poured a lot of love into this book, particularly into the queer romance. She is a queer artist, and
Hmm.
I don't know that they would have leapt off the page in the same way had she not been involved. I'm really grateful for her contributions.
And now you said that you guys didn't actually. Am I right that you guys didn't actually meet or talk before? Or did you guys communicate during while? So you did your script and passed it off to her, and
Yeah, I
so
passed it
okay.
off to my editors. We got all the approvals because, you know, whenever you're doing a licensed project, your editors need approval, your publisher, and the licensor.
Right.
So we went through all of that, and then once the scripts were in the bag, then, you know, my editors took them to Christiane, and she did her work, and I didn't really see anything until it was done, which is wild because that's the only time that I've ever worked this way.
Hmm.
So it was like, yeah, it was kind of like Christmas, just opening the book for the first time and seeing all of this. So yeah, it's a different process. I get why they did. I don't think that I would be as into it for my creator owned. I think that's, you know, that's definitely a different animal.
Hmm.
But you know, for this, it was kind of fun.
So, I mean, it looks like a lot of your previous work has been horror based.
Yep.
What was it? Was it a much of a challenge with being a property and kind of magical based to kind of I don't want to
Um,
say really switch genres, but it's kind of a
Yeah,
different
it's
genre.
fantasy. It is. I mean,
Yeah.
there's certainly some scary elements in the building of suspense, and there's a lot of action there. Um, I mean, I definitely had to put myself in another zone, right? Because I had not written something with a cast of characters that have magical powers before, and ensuring that everyone got a chance to use those powers in some way, shape, or form throughout the story, hopefully to great effect,
Hmm.
was definitely challenging, but a welcome challenge. One of the things that comics has done for me as a storyteller, excuse me, I got my start in theater, which is, you know, uh, yeah, of course, there's special effects in theater, but unless you are writing for the Broadway stage, you're probably not going to have a budget for that.
Right.
So you tend to think a little bit more grounded, a little bit more realistic, a little bit more in this box. And gradually, as I've moved along in my writing career, my brain has really had to expand to encompass more and more. And the greatest challenge with comics is that, I mean, really, the sky is the limit. And the idea of having a high concept hook becomes extremely important in these types of books. So this to me was a wonderful challenge in terms of, these characters, they have superpowers, but the superpowers are part and parcel of a lot of the issues that they're dealing with. And their powers come with baggage, and it's emotional. And and what I am very familiar with is, crafting very three-dimensional characters and having their emotions, their characters drive story. So, kind of linking their powers to their paths, to their emotional lives, was really, really helpful in making sure that when they used their powers, it was impactful. So yeah, I think
And
that element was definitely a leap. Um, but and then in terms of the world, what becomes very exciting though is that we're dealing with a magical world, so you can really kind of let your mind run wild when
mhm.
it comes to, well, what kinds of creatures can we have here? And I was also given a gift as a continuation of this series. I got to define the realm of darkness and what that world is about, the rules for it. And it was, I really kind of got to do whatever I wanted with it. And it was a wonderful invitation to be as, creative as I wanted to be. So yeah, but definitely, yeah, it was a switch in gears for sure, but a very, very welcome one.
And does it kind of go for your? I know you've done some TV writing too. Is that kind of the same, you know, process of translating, or like you said, with theater, there's that, but with TV, you kind of also are able to do certain things that you can't do on the comic page, but you can do things on the comic page you can't do on TV.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
I
know.
think the
That was
difference.
very long-winded and probably confusing. So
Oh no, listen, I'm the most long-winded. No, I think with television writing, I mean, obviously, when you're staffed on a show, there you have to think about budgetary concerns. You have to stay in certain locations. There's certain things some actors will do, other actors won't. You have a lot of personalities on set. And so there's things to navigate in that regard. Obviously, when it comes to comic books, you don't have to worry as much about that. But I think the biggest difference in terms of the storytelling is that when you have a season of television, if it's an hour long and you have 8 episodes, that's 8 hours that you have to tell an arc. With comic books and graphic novels, oftentimes you have about 100 to 120 pages to tell an arc. Traditionally, if you're doing like a series of single issues, and with this one, it had to be 100 pages. Not only that, but this is a smaller format book, so you have less panels per page.
uh
So the stories tend to move faster in comic books, and you don't get as much juice, and that is definitely challenging when you are telling a story about a bunch of teenagers. because it's all emotional juice. So, navigating that's can be a bit difficult. So TV, and especially when you see something that is adapted from a comic book to a TV series, you often find that, you have more space for plot, more plot is added, more arcs are added, the arcs are more in depth. You can tell more in-depth storytelling. That's not true for every comic book. I mean, I think that, you will see plenty that really dig deep into, the experience of the characters. But as far as the stories that I have told, it is important to keep the action moving,
Mhm.
as well as maintaining those emotional arcs. So it's that dance. So, but in terms of structure, most of the work that I've done has been in single issue. So you have, 5 issues to an arc with an hour-long TV show with an hour-long episode. You usually have 5 acts, which is based on the old commercial break format. So, in terms of like, meeting your act outs or your chapter outs, as it were, your book outs, that structurally that is consistent.
Hmm. So, as a writer, who inspires you, or who do you enjoy? You know, who do you read to look for inspiration or how to convey not not outright copy, but kind of look to and say, I like how they're doing this. Let's see how I can make it work for me.
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I have any one writer whose work necessarily is like the one that I would go to for inspiration, because
Mhm.
I consume at this point, and this might have been a mistake. We'll see how long I last. I am now working in the film space, the TV space, comic books, and I just got my first book deal in the traditional publishing space. Trying to stay on top of all of those mediums and what's going on in all of them is literally impossible. But what I do try and do is whatever project that I'm involving myself in that week, I try and consume something like it. And so I've found lots of inspirations in that regard. I'm currently writing a YA book with Scholastic, and I just read 13 Reasons Why. I had watched the television show, but I'd never read the book. And I thought it was beautiful and gut wrenching in its simplicity. And so one of the inspirations that I found from that is that, yes, language is beautiful, but, very, very simple sentences can convey so much.
Mhm.
um and you don't have to be fancy. Stephen King has always been an inspiration of mine. I don't I He makes some choices that I wouldn't necessarily make, but what I love is that he's just a machine, and he is so passionate. And I read his book on writing, and I loved what he had to say. I loved how honest he was about his career and the rules that he, puts down for himself, and his suggestions to other writers, and how giving he is to other creatives. I found a lot of inspiration recently in television shows that I've watched. I thought that Fallout was beautifully constructed and grotesque and wonderful and had deliciously complex characters. I think that the first show that ever like just knocked me into the wall in terms of what TV could do was 6 Feet Under. I mean, it was fantastic. Um, so I find inspiration all over the place. And in terms of comic books, when I first started out, I was really, I wanted to find out. Obviously, I stepped into the world of comic book writing, and I was like, whoa, this is not just Betty and Veronica anymore. So I grabbed as many books as I could, and I read through a bunch of them. And found witches really inspiring. I didn't know that so much emotion, backstory, and how it was explored, how it all came to fruition. I thought it was beautifully constructed. Motherland was a book that I just loved. It was so high concept and so weird, and yet so emotionally resonant. I didn't know you could do that in comics. Sex Criminals, talk about weird. and and I mean, it's about a couple that has orgasms and freezes time. First of all, I didn't know that you could put out a book that was just so blatantly sexual, but also it's about them. It's about their relation. It's a beautiful relationship story. And that snuck up on me as something really revelatory. So I look everywhere for inspiration. Also, sometimes just like a good old fashioned trip to a museum and just sitting in quiet and observing what people make. Sometimes I find inspiration just in choreography. Um, art art that is made with heart and intention will always inspire other great things. So yeah, I don't know that there's any one person that I go to. Oh, and Neil Gaiman's career. I want that. That's inspiring. I when I first met with my management company, who I love dearly, I sat at the table and they said, well, what are your goals for yourself? And I said, I want to be the Latina Neil Gaiman, and they were like, okay, that's what we're shooting for. So yeah, I wear a key around my neck always to open doors, and I think that it also opens the doors to inspiration because I find it in a lot of places, and I try not to be precious about where it comes from.
All right. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about the book that perhaps we didn't cover?
Um, let's see. I mean, I, I feel like, let me see. Anything else to say about the book? I mean, I think that, oftentimes, especially when you're a fan of a series and you see something like a graphic novel coming out, the apprehension is always, did they just, spit this out in order to, just kind of capitalize on the popularity of the show? And what I can say to that is it was absolutely not what went into this book.
Mhm.
I refuse to put out anything that isn't well thought out and incredibly heartfelt. And I put a lot of myself into this. The editors did as well. Christiane put so much love and heart into this book. And, love it, hate it. It's totally fine to have an opinion. But it really was crafted with love, even with the short amount of time that we had to do it. And we've all become, big fans of the series and these characters. And I'm really excited for people to finally get to read it, to let us know their thoughts. I'm excited to, collect data, see how the sales do, and if we do get a volume 3, to, be able to incorporate a lot of the feedback that we've gotten moving on to constructing these stories, because I didn't have that input before. So, for those of you
So,
out there
so this
reading
one
the
is
book,
volume 1 and 2.
volume 1 and 2 have been written.
Okay.
Volume 2 will be out next year. What we don't know
Okay.
about yet is if we're going to get a volume 3. It's looking very good, because
Hmm.
the sales for the first book are already great. But yes, more momentum never hurts. And if you read the book, please feel free to find me. I'm very easy to find on Instagram. There's really only one Olivia Cartero-Briggs, believe it or not. And you can hit me up on Instagram and tell me what you think, and hit me with your wish list. And don't be afraid to be weird. I'm a creator. I'm as weird as it gets. So no judgment, and you never know what could spark something in a creator. Like I said, I find inspiration everywhere. So
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time this evening to talk about the book, and maybe when volume 2 is ready to come out, we can we'll have you back if you want, and we can talk about volume 2 and where that book is going and where the characters are going, and hopefully by then we'll know if volume 3 is coming out.
yes, no, that would be great. I would love that.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to Mad Cave for helping connect us, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds great, Chad. Have a good night.
You too.